Taken in plain sight, the abduction no one stopped. A true U.S. crime story. Before we begin, listen carefully. This is not a story about a stranger hiding in the dark. This is a story about trust, about a child taken without force, about a crime that happened again and again while everyone was watching. What you are about to hear is real. It happened in the United States, and it changed how America understands abduction forever. If this story makes you uncomfortable, that is the point. Because the most dangerous crimes are not the loud ones, they are the quiet ones. Stay with us until the end, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about safety, trust, and danger hiding in plain sight. The knock on the door was calm, too calm. A man stood outside, smiling, holding papers in his hand. He looked safe. He looked trusted. He looked like someone who belonged there. Inside the house, a young girl sat quietly, unaware that her life was about to be taken, not by force, not by violence, but by permission. Her parents listened as the man spoke. He explained there was a problem. He said dangerous people were watching their daughter. He said she was not safe anymore. He said the only way to protect her was to let him take her away for a little while. And unbelievably, they agreed. That night, their daughter left with him. No screaming, no struggle, no alarms, no police. She was abducted in plain sight. But what makes this case one of the most shocking abductions in American history is not just that she was taken, it is that she would be taken again and again over years, while the people who loved her most stood close enough to stop it and never did. What happened next would expose one of the most disturbing failures of trust ever recorded in a true crime case. And the worst part was still to come. Long before the headlines, before the documentaries, before the nation learned her name, life in Pocatello, Idaho was quiet and simple. Families trusted one another. Neighbors left doors unlocked. Children rode bikes without fear. The girl at the center of this story was bright, friendly, and full of life. She loved school. She loved her family. She trusted adults because she had been taught to. Her parents were respected in the community. They believed in kindness. They believed in helping others. And they believed deeply in trusting people who seemed good. That belief would be used against them. The man who entered their lives was well-spoken, polite, and intelligent. He presented himself as a friend. He offered help. He spent time with the family. He gained their trust slowly, carefully, and completely. No one suspected him. Not neighbors, not teachers, not even the parents. He became part of their world. At first, nothing seemed wrong. He helped around the house. He talked with the parents for hours. He played games with the children. He listened. But quietly, behind closed doors, something darker was happening. The man began to isolate the girl emotionally. He told her secrets. He confused her. He made her believe that danger was everywhere, except with him. He convinced her that he was her protector. And then he convinced her parents of the same thing. One day, he claimed powerful people were watching their daughter. He said she was marked. He said she could be kidnapped or killed at any moment. Fear took over the room. The man offered a solution. He said he could hide her. He said it would be temporary. He said it was the only way to save her life. The parents hesitated, but fear is louder than logic, and trust can blind even the strongest instincts. They let him take her.
The car drove away. Hours passed, then days. Suddenly, the parents realized something was very wrong. They went to the police. The search exploded across the region. Flyers were printed. Roads were checked. The girl's face appeared everywhere. Behind the scenes, the man watched calmly. Then, weeks later, something unbelievable happened.
A letter arrived. It was from the man. He claimed he had abducted the girl to protect her. He demanded silence, he demanded obedience, and he warned that if the parents contacted authorities again, their daughter would be harmed. Fear returned, stronger than ever. The parents believed they were making the safest choice. They stopped cooperating fully with police. They waited. And then, months later, the girl came home, alive. The family cried. The community celebrated. The nightmare seemed over. But the real nightmare had only paused. The man was not arrested. He was not questioned deeply. He was not removed from their lives. Incredibly, he was welcomed back. He explained everything away. He manipulated. He twisted the truth. He made the parents feel guilty. He made the girl feel confused. And slowly, he regained control. Years passed. Then it happened again. The same man took the same girl a second time. Once again, the warning signs were there. Once again, fear overpowered reason. Once again, the abduction happened without force. This time, the girl was taken across borders. She was hidden. She was isolated. She was told lies about her family. She was told they did not want her anymore. Inside, she felt lost, confused, afraid, but still trusting. Authorities searched again. The case grew larger. International attention followed. And once again, unbelievably, she returned home alive. By now, the damage was deep. The girl struggled to understand what had happened to her. The adults around her struggled to accept their role. The man still walked free. No handcuffs, no prison, no justice. The community whispered. People asked questions. How could this happen twice? How could no one stop it? But the most horrifying truth had not yet surfaced. Years later, as the girl grew older, she began to understand the full weight of what had been done to her. She realized the man had never been her protector. He had been her captor all along. The realization shattered everything she believed. When the truth finally came out, it shocked the nation. Not just because a child had been abducted, but because it had happened openly, repeatedly, and with the permission of those who trusted the abductor the most. This was not a story about darkness hiding in alleys. This was a story about evil standing in living rooms, smiling, and being invited inside. As the case finally reached the courts, the country watched closely. But justice would not come easily, and the final chapter of this story would leave many asking a painful question that still echoes today. How could something so terrible happen while everyone was watching? And in the next chapter, we will follow the investigation that finally exposed the man behind the smile and the moment the truth became impossible to ignore. The courtroom was silent when the evidence was laid out, not because people didn't understand it, but because they couldn't believe it. The same man, the same child, the same family. And yet, for years, no one had stopped him. As investigators reopened the case, one question hung heavy in the air. How did he get away with it for so long? The answer would expose a chain of trust, fear, and manipulation so deep that even trained professionals struggled to explain it. And just as the truth began to surface, another shocking detail emerged. The girl had been taken a third time. Years earlier, after the second abduction ended, the family believed the nightmare was finally over. The man promised it would never happen again. He cried, he apologized, he blamed stress, he blamed misunderstandings. And once again, he was believed. The parents wanted peace. They wanted normal life back. They wanted to forget the fear. And the girl, still young, still confused, wanted everything to stop. So silence returned. The man stayed close, too close. He called, he visited, he watched, he waited. Behind closed doors, the damage to the girl's mind was growing. She felt guilt she didn't understand, fear she couldn't explain, and loyalty to someone who had hurt her because he had taught her that this pain was protection. That is how control works. Slow, quiet, invisible. When she tried to speak, she didn't have the words. When adults asked questions, they didn't ask the right ones. And the man knew it. He knew the family feared embarrassment. He knew they feared judgment. He knew they feared the truth more than they feared him. That fear became his shield. Then one day, without warning, he disappeared again. So did the girl. This time, the search exploded nationwide. Police crossed state lines. Federal agents joined in. Airports were alerted. Borders were watched. The man had learned from his past mistakes. He changed names. He moved fast. He kept the girl isolated. He told her her parents had abandoned her. Weeks passed, then months. The case grew colder, until one mistake changed everything. Authorities tracked the man to a foreign country. He had grown careless. Someone recognized him. Someone spoke up. When police finally reached the location, they found the girl alive. But she was not the same child who had left years before. She was older, quieter, broken in ways no one could see at first glance. This time, there would be no explanations, no apologies. The man was arrested. And when he was brought back to the United States, the full truth began to unravel. Investigators uncovered letters, recordings, plans, lies layered on top of lies. They learned how he had convinced adults to hand over a child, how he used fear to control parents, how he used kindness as a weapon. Experts called it one of the most extreme cases of psychological manipulation they had ever seen. The girl finally spoke openly. What she described stunned even seasoned investigators, not because of violence, but because of how easily it all happened. No force, no chains, no masks, just words. The trial drew national attention. Reporters packed the courtroom. Families across America watched, wondering how something like this could happen in a normal neighborhood. The defense tried to shift blame. They claimed misunderstandings, mental health issues, consent. But the evidence was overwhelming. The man was convicted, sentenced, removed from society. Justice at last had arrived. But justice does not erase damage. As the girl grew into adulthood, she struggled with questions that had no easy answers. Why had no one stopped it earlier? Why had adults trusted the wrong person? Why had her warnings gone unheard? Her parents carried their own weight of guilt, knowing their love had been used against their child. The case changed how America talks about abduction. It taught a terrifying lesson. Danger does not always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks helpful. Sometimes it looks friendly. Sometimes it looks like someone you trust. Years later, the girl would share her story publicly, not for sympathy, but as a warning. Because what happened to her did not begin with a crime. It began with trust. And as Chapter 2 closes, one final question remains, a question that would shape her life forever. After surviving what no child should endure, how do you rebuild a life that was stolen in plain sight? That answer comes next. The first time she told the full truth out loud, her voice did not shake. That surprised everyone. After everything she survived, people expected tears. They expected anger. They expected fear. Instead, she spoke calmly. And that calm made the room uncomfortable. Because what she revealed next forced everyone listening to face a hard truth. This crime did not survive on violence alone. It survived on silence. After the trial ended and the man was sent away, the world moved on. News cameras left, headlines faded. Another case replaced hers. But for her, the story did not end. She was now an adult, trying to understand a childhood that had been stolen slowly, quietly, and right in front of people who loved her. At first, she tried to live a normal life. She went to school, she made friends, she smiled when expected. But inside, her mind was still trapped in the past. Small things triggered memories: a knock on the door, a friendly stranger, a calm voice giving instructions. Trust felt dangerous. For years, she blamed herself. She wondered why she hadn't screamed, why she hadn't run, why she hadn't fought. It took a long time for her to understand the truth. She was a child, and the crime was never her fault. Therapists helped her see what really happened, how she had been groomed, how fear had been planted in her mind, how loyalty had been forced on her before she was old enough to understand what loyalty meant. She learned that manipulation can be stronger than chains, and that realization changed everything. Slowly, she found her voice. She began speaking to investigators, then to counselors, then eventually to the public. When she told her story, people across America reacted with shock and anger. Parents asked themselves if they would have noticed the signs. Teachers wondered if they would have spoken up. Her case became a warning, not about strangers hiding in shadows, but about danger sitting at the table. Experts began using her story to teach others how abductions can really happen, how predators gain trust, how they use fear, kindness, and authority to control families. The phrase "taken in plain sight" became more than a title. It became a lesson. Her parents also faced the truth. They spoke openly about their mistakes, about how fear clouded their judgment, about how they trusted the wrong person. Their honesty was painful, but necessary. They wanted other families to learn from what happened, so no child would ever be placed in that position again. Over time, laws changed, awareness grew. Conversations started happening in homes and schools across the country. But for her, healing was not fast. Some wounds don't show. They live in the mind, in the memory, in the moments when trust is tested. Still, she kept moving forward. She chose not to be defined only by what was done to her. She chose survival. Today, her story stands as one of the most shocking abduction cases in American history, not because of how it began, but because of how long it lasted. A crime that did not hide, a crime that did not rush, a crime that succeeded because everyone thought it could never happen to them. And that is why this case still matters. Because it asks a question that has no easy answer. If a child can be taken without force, without violence, and without resistance, how many other crimes are happening right now in plain sight? That question lingers, and it should.
Because awareness is the only thing that stops silence from becoming permission. And this story is not just about the past. It is a warning for the present and a reminder that the most dangerous lies often sound calm, reasonable, and safe. Before we continue, take a moment. Stories like this matter because they don't just reveal what happened, they reveal what was missed. If you're finding yourself asking, "How did this happen?" or "Would I have noticed the signs?" you are not alone. This channel exists to tell the real stories others overlook, the true crimes that teach us how danger actually works. If you want more real U.S. true crime stories told with care, depth, and honesty, subscribe now and stay with us. The next part of this story reveals the moment everything began to unravel. The moment the documentary aired, something unexpected happened. Phones began to ring, not just at news stations, but in homes across America. Parents called their adult children. Teachers spoke to their students. Survivors who had stayed silent for years felt something break open inside them. Because this story was not just shocking, it was familiar.
And that realization hit harder than any courtroom verdict ever could. For the woman at the center of this story, sharing the truth was never about fame. It was about control, taking it back. For years, other people had told her story for her. Reporters, investigators, commentators. Each one focused on the crime itself. But she wanted people to understand what happened before the abduction. The small moments, the jokes that crossed lines, the secrets framed as protection, the fear planted gently, then watered daily. She explained how the man never rushed, how he waited, how he tested limits, how he slowly rewrote reality until lies felt normal, and how adults, good people, were pulled into the story without realizing it. She spoke about how confusion can silence a child more effectively than threats, how obedience can be mistaken for safety, how love can be used as leverage. Her words were simple, calm, clear, and devastating. As the story spread, experts began connecting it to other cases, different states, different families, same pattern. Not all ended with rescue. Some children were never found. Some survivors never spoke. Some families never recovered. The woman knew this. That knowledge stayed heavy. She said the hardest part was knowing that if just one adult had asked a better question, not a louder one, not an angrier one, everything could have changed. Just one person saying, "This doesn't feel right." But no one did. Because the man didn't look dangerous. Because the idea felt impossible. Because it was easier to believe a calm lie than to face a terrifying truth. She also spoke about forgiveness, not as an excuse, but as a way forward. She did not forgive what was done. She forgave herself. That was the turning point. She stopped asking why she didn't stop it. She stopped carrying blame that was never hers. She stopped measuring her strength by how early she should have spoken. She began measuring it by the fact that she survived. Her parents also continued speaking publicly. They did not defend their choices. They explained them. They talked about fear, about pressure, about how predators can sound reasonable when they know exactly what to say. Their honesty was painful to hear and necessary, because this case was never about bad parents. It was about how trust, when unchecked, can become a doorway. Over time, schools began using the case in training programs. Social workers studied it. Law enforcement re-examined how abductions are identified. The phrase, "taken in plain sight," became a warning label, not just the title. It reminded people that danger does not always announce itself. Sometimes it asks politely. Sometimes it waits patiently. Sometimes it walks through the front door. Years have passed now. The man who caused this harm remains behind bars, where he can no longer hurt anyone. But his shadow still exists, not in memory, but in lessons learned. The woman continues her life, carrying scars that never fully disappear, but no longer letting them control her future. She speaks when she chooses. She rests when she needs. She lives on her own terms. And her story continues to save others, not because it scares them, but because it teaches them to look closer, to question calmly spoken fears, to protect without panic.
To listen when something feels wrong, even if it looks right. The most shocking part of this abduction was not how far the man went. It was how far he was allowed to go. And the final question this story leaves us with is not about the past, it's about now. What warning signs are being ignored today, quietly, politely, and in plain sight? That answer depends on who is watching and who is willing to speak. The warning signs were always there. They just did not look like danger. They looked like kindness. Years after the case became known across America, People began re-watching old interviews, old footage, old statements, and suddenly moments that once felt normal now felt terrifying. The man never raised his voice. He never used force. He never looked angry. He asked questions softly. He offered help. He sounded reasonable. That is why this story still unsettles people, because it proves that evil does not always rush. Sometimes it waits for permission. Experts who studied the case noticed something chilling. The abduction did not happen in one moment. It happened in hundreds of small ones. A conversation that crossed a line, a secret kept too long, a fear planted without proof, a decision made to avoid conflict. Each moment alone seemed harmless. Together, they created a prison. The woman explained that as a child, she believed adults always knew best. When someone older spoke with confidence, she listened. That trust was turned into a weapon. She was told the world was dangerous. She was told only one person could protect her. She was told silence was safety. And because those words came from someone welcomed into her home, she believed them. Looking back, she said the most painful realization was this: no one ever asked her what she wanted. Decisions were made around her, for her, about her, and that made it easier for someone else to take control. As awareness grew, more survivors began speaking out. Different stories, different places, same pattern. Trusted figures, slow grooming, quiet fear. These were not crimes of chaos, they were crimes of patience. Parents listening to these stories began changing how they talked to their children. They stopped teaching blind obedience, they started teaching questions. Teachers learned to listen more closely. Police learned to look beyond force and focus on influence. And slowly, something important began to change. Silence lost some of its power. For the woman at the center of this case, healing did not mean forgetting, it meant understanding. She learned that what happened to her could happen to anyone, any family, any neighborhood, any town that believes danger only looks one way. She also learned that survival does not always look brave. Sometimes it looks quiet. Sometimes it looks confused. Sometimes it looks like waiting until it feels safe to speak. And that is still strength. Today, her story continues to be shared not as a headline, but as a lesson. A reminder that children need more than protection. They need voices. They need to be heard. They need to be believed. And adults need to remember that trust must be earned, not assumed. Because the most dangerous crimes are not always hidden. They happen with doors open, with smiles, with permission. They happen in plain sight. As this chapter closes, the story leaves us with one final warning. Not shouted, not forced, but quietly spoken. Pay attention to what feels wrong, even when it looks right. Because the next crime may not come with fear. It may come with a smile. And by the time it is recognized for what it is, it may already be too late. Years later, when people ask how this could have happened, the answer is never simple. Because this story is not about one bad moment. It is about many quiet ones. Moments when fear sounded reasonable. Moments when trust felt safer than doubt. Moments when silence seemed easier than asking hard questions. That is how this crime lived for so long. Not in darkness, but in comfort. The woman often says the most powerful thing she learned came after everything was over. She learned that danger does not need force when it has permission. The man who took her never broke a door. He never ran. He never hid in shadows. He was invited in. And that truth still makes people uncomfortable. Because it means protection is not just about locks or rules. It's about awareness, about listening, about slowing down when something feels off, even if you cannot explain why. She now speaks carefully, not loudly. She does not try to scare parents. She tries to prepare them. She tells them to teach children that adults can be wrong, that secrets are not safety, that fear should always be questioned, not obeyed.
She tells them to listen when a child grows quiet, because silence is often the first warning. Her parents live with the weight of what happened, but they also live with purpose. They chose to turn their worst mistake into a lesson for others. They speak honestly about how love can be used against you, how fear can cloud judgment, how predators often look like helpers. Their message is simple. Do not trust blindly. Do not fear questioning. Do not ignore discomfort, because discomfort is information. This case will always be remembered as one of America's most shocking abductions, not because of how it began, but because of how long it was allowed to continue. A child taken again and again, not hidden, not chased, but handed over. That is why this story still matters today, because crimes like this do not belong to the past. They only need opportunity. And opportunity comes when people stop paying attention. As we end this story, there is no loud warning, no dramatic ending, just a quiet truth that stays with you. The most dangerous threat is not always the one you fear. It is the one you trust. And the difference between safety and tragedy is often one question that was never asked, one voice that was never heard, one moment that passed in plain sight. If this story stayed with you, there is a reason. It wasn't just about one crime. It was about silence. It was about trust. And it was about how easily danger can look safe. Real crime stories are not meant to scare you. They are meant to wake you up. On this channel, we tell true American crime stories, not for shock, but for understanding. Because the more we understand, the harder it becomes for these crimes to happen again. If you believe these stories matter, subscribe now. Turn on notifications and stay with us, because the next true crime story may not be history. It may be happening right now, in plain sight.